when they were a young family and looking for a place to live, they could not find a rental at all that would accept their dog. So much so that finally my husband and I helped them with a down payment on their first house because they were not going to be able to find a place to live. Now, not everybody's that lucky, right?
Well, it's nice to meet you, Judith. I'm Patrick.
Patrick, nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
So glad to have you with us here on Lift It. Tell us a little bit where you out of, where you from?
So I live in the St. Pete, Florida area. So that's the west coast of Florida, very near Tampa. But I'm originally a Georgia girl, so not too far from where you are in Mississippi.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. How long you been in Florida down there?
Oh my goodness. So, I moved here for a man that I've been married to almost 25 years now. So we have been in Florida a total of about 27 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
long time.
I'm telling you, everything happens for a reason.
It does. It totally does.
I was looking and I was noticing okay, you're talking about the pet housing. Feel me? I mean, I
Mhm.
love taking my pets whenever I can, but it seems like it's actually getting easier and easier to travel with our pets than what it used to be. Mm,
Yeah, I think in many ways it's easier. You have seen the airlines at least come out, with rules about what pets can
mhm.
travel with you in the cabin or, in the belly of the plane. And I'm seeing more and more hotels, people in the hospitality industry allow pets. And so, yeah, I think in many ways it's easier to travel. There are still a few obstacles. And,
Mhm.
I have 3 dogs. It's really tough to travel with 3 dogs. So, we don't usually do that. But, if I had one or, a cat, then yeah, I would probably take them everywhere.
The last time I was on a plane, I guess back in November, I was flying back from Vegas. This girl had hers. You wouldn't even know she had it. I mean, she
Isn't it
had like a
amazing?
little hoodie, a zipper, and she had it just sitting right there. And it was the quietest
Sure.
puppy. It never even woke up, getting on and off the
That's so
plane and
funny.
everything. And I see a lot more and more. And especially I started noticing out in Vegas, you would see them walking through the lobbies with I mean, little dogs. These are big old dogs.
Oh,
And I was
sure.
surprised.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, and then now you see it more and more and more. I usually board mine because if I go to Vegas, I'm out there for 2.5 weeks. So I board mine. I found a
Okay.
guy up here that does really, really good with them. And he has a grooming
Mhm.
business. So he has his
Perfect.
boarding, his grooming, and his house. So on the weekends, he's working and he's got a big family. So there's always somebody around. So they're
That's
not
nice.
sitting there. Some of the places only let your animals out for maybe an hour on a Saturday or an
Mhm.
hour on Sunday. And it's like that poor baby's, they locked up,
Yeah.
So it took me a while, but when I found him, I'm like, boom,
That's
you
so
got it.
perfect. Yeah, when we travel, we're really lucky that we have a friend comes and stays at our house. So the dogs don't have to be disrupted in any way. They still have their great big backyard to run around in. So, yeah, it's
And
it's nice to have that.
it's so hard dropping them off because you just get that look like, really? And especially if I take the bag, he knows, they know. If I go up there
Do.
with just him, he knows he's going for a spa day for his, shaving and all that good
Sure.
stuff. And when I go up there and I have a bag of stuff, he's not happy. He knows.
Oh.
He knows it's time
Yeah,
for
our dogs
Vegas.
know when we pull the suitcases out, we just start getting the whole side eye from them. They know we're about to
Mhm.
leave. But the beautiful thing about dogs is that the moment you walk in the door, they're so happy to see you. All is
They are.
forgiven.
They are. They are. I love it. I bought a motorhome about 4 years ago, and I go down to Florida a lot, down in Navarre area by
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Pensacola. I
Yeah.
stay down there about 4 or 5 months out of the year. I just set it
Very
up.
nice.
I only bought it to take to the beach because I just like $500 a night at the beach. Can't keep doing that. My RV don't even cost 500 a month. And it's mine. It's full of stuff that I
That's
need. So it's
awesome.
like I can set it up on the bay down there in Navarre. So
Yeah.
I got my license in Florida because of that. But my puppy, he knows when we're doing that even. He knows the difference in our trips.
Oh,
And
how about that?
he's fun. And I love it because I can take him with me, and he's so
Mhm.
mellow. I mean, he don't bark. I'm like, what is all these other dogs barking at the campground? But mine just looks at them like, really? It's a waste of time.
Oh, that is hysterical. I think it's funny. I feel like dogs are in some ways clairvoyant because, we'll get them in the car to go a variety of places.
Mhm.
They always seem to just instinctively know when we're going to the vet. They're not happy
That
about
is amazing. It's
it.
amazing.
Mhm.
It's amazing. So tell me a little bit more of how you run your business and how you
Sure.
can help buyers and sellers and
Sure.
everything else in
So
our little world.
yeah. So I actually started really right out of college in the multifamily housing business, not as an owner or operator, always on the supplier side. So you may remember way back in the day, there was a company called the Apartment Guide. They were the little books that were
I remember that.
everywhere.
Hmm.
And
I
if you were
remember
looking for an
those.
apartment, you'd pick one up and thumb through it and, find your area and find your apartment. So I started with them right out of college, was with them the first 12 years of my career. I mean, a really
Wow.
fantastic way to start my career. Loved what I did. And then ended up leaving the industry for about a 5-year period, a year of which was to work for the Atlanta Olympics when in
Oh,
'96 when the Olympics were in Atlanta. So
nice.
that was just an amazing, amazing experience. I worked for the
Wow.
provider that handled all of the private housing for the Olympics.
Okay.
So people who were renting out their homes or their apartments, we handled the operations for that. So that was very cool. Got to meet a
I would
lot
have
of
never. I'd,
athletes.
I'd have never thought that.
Yeah, but that happens in every city because there's never enough hotel stock. So people will rent out their homes, they'll rent out their apartments, and they make a ton of money doing it. For example, if you were in the first circle, we'd have it set up in areas and then the homes were priced out that way. If you
Okay.
were in this first circle in Metro Atlanta, you could rent out your house for a 6-day period for $18,000, and that was in 1996. So people would
Wow.
do this, right? A lot of people would do it. But it was a really fascinating time, loved it. Then went to work outside the industry for Icon Office Solutions, huge tech company, for about between 4 and 5 years, was recruited back into the industry by the Apartment Finder, which was another company that did apartment marketing. They were ultimately bought by CoStar, and then I ended up going to work for a company called RentPath, which was the next iteration of Apartment Guide.
Okay.
They owned Apartment Guide and rentals.com, and so I got to be with them. Really very interesting thing for me to do in my career as they were going through their print to digital transition. So, I started my career with a print publication and then got to be a part of transitioning that over to the digital world, with websites. And so we did that for many, many years. And I would say it's coming up on 10 years ago, hard to believe. I had just reached that point in my career where I'd been a road warrior for so many years and had supervised very, very large teams of people and just was ready to simplify and do my own thing. So I hung a shingle and became a consultant. And as it turns out, most of my clients are early stage property technology companies. So
Oh, wow.
these are companies that provide a variety of solutions to the industry to help them operate, faster, more efficiently, coming into the technology world of things. And, hasn't heard of AI these days. That's been very, very big in the last couple of years. And, I love, love, love what I do. I feel like it keeps me young. I get to work with these young, bright entrepreneurs and stay on top of really the cutting edge of what's happening in the industry.
Getting ahead of it. Smart. Very smart.
Yeah. Love it.
And I would have never thought of that. Renting out your house for like events like that. I had
Mhm.
no I mean, that's not something we do here. So I'm like, that is
No,
so,
no.
you know,
But if you lived in Augusta, Georgia, where the Masters is, you probably would rent your house out for the Masters. People make enough money to pay their mortgage for the entire year, renting their house out for the Masters. It's crazy,
and
right?
see people, I would have never thought about that. So now we're
Mhm.
putting it out there for more people to think about. That is so
Yeah,
smart.
exactly.
Now, are you pretty much staying where you are now in your company or
Well,
give me a
yeah,
little bit?
it's my company. My husband, who's also in the industry, left his employer about a year and a half ago and joined my business. So we are both doing this now, and it's
Nice.
sort of the perfect. We're not ready to retire yet because we love working, we love what we do, but it's sort of the perfect next step because the stress level is much lower than when you're working for a big company. And so, we again, we love what we do. We work with a lot of very bright people. It allows us to stay very connected to the industry and know kind of where the industry is headed. And then, one of the reasons I think you reached out to me was my work, which is a little bit not outside the industry, it's right next to it, is my work with the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative, which is an animal welfare nonprofit arm of the Michelson Found Animals Foundation out of California. But I've worked with them for a little over 5 years now as an advisor, and their mission is to educate owners and operators of rental housing with regard to pets because,
Okay.
as you probably know, most apartment communities are more pet friendly now, but there's a big difference between pet friendly and pet inclusive because there are a lot of breed restrictions, weight restrictions. And so the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative works toward educating owners and operators as to, what's the real deal when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
pets and why allowing more pets into your communities is actually a really great business decision.
No, I agree. I totally agree. I mean, like you said, like we're both talking, they're smart as they can be. I mean,
Hmm.
I'll sit there on YouTube half the night watching just the videos of people animals, and their reactions with people. It's amazing. They're so
Yeah.
smart, Sometimes you just got to look at it and think about, wow, you know.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, I don't know why we're so floored that they can do that, but it's just sometimes that puppy will give you that look or, it's like "You're reading my mind. What's wrong?" It's like they know.
Well,
It's so good.
I think what you're resonating with is what a lot of people resonate with when it comes to their domestic pets nowadays is that they're family to us,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
They're like kids. And in fact, for a lot of, younger groups, they are their
Mhm.
kids, right? They're like, we have really good friends, neighbors of ours who are significantly younger than us. They have two dogs. They are not having children. Their dogs are their children.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's just a completely different dynamic. But most of the people in the US do think of their pets as family.
I totally. I sat there
Mhm.
and I told a friend of mine, she had 2 kids, and I said, "I don't know how you did it." She's like, "What you mean?" I said, "I worry when I take him out to go to the bathroom. How'd you let your kid get behind the wheel for the first time to drive?" It's like,
Yeah,
how did you get through that without stressing and
those are
worrying
tough
about them all
times.
the time? I was like, I
Mhm.
couldn't do that. Like you could. And
Mhm.
it's just, it's amazing. Animals are absolutely amazing. And, like,
They
I even
are.
started noticing I think the last time I drove up north, I call it my, hurricane evacuation just in case, up to Tunica, Mississippi, so I'll go up there and I'll play at the casinos, try to at least once a year, so they'll keep sending me free rooms, so if something comes up I mean, it's 6 hours north, so that's a good place to go in case we do
Yeah,
get a hurricane, and it's a nice little trip, but I have noticed
yeah.
going up that way stopped at it was either a racetrack or one of the bigger gas station truck
Mhm.
stops, and they had walk-in areas fenced off for your
Oh,
pets.
sure.
And I was like,
Yep.
"That's nice," because
Isn't
you
that
see
nice?
even with all you see a lot of the truckers driving on the road all the time, and their puppies right there with them,
They are.
and
Well,
that's a
and
win-win.
it is a win-win, and I've noticed that too. I recently had to, travel back and forth to Georgia a bunch, sort of middle central Georgia, because I had a relative pass away and
Oh,
I was
no.
handling their estate. And so I was making that drive from here in Florida to Georgia frequently, and I was taking one of my dogs with me most of the time. And I noticed that many of the larger, like the Loves and the racetracks, had fenced in areas for your dog, which is, as a pet owner, such a nice thing and gives you such a sense of security because always worry when I take my dogs out near a busy highway or a busy road, even when they're on
Mhm.
leash. But when I can be in a fenced enclosure, I just feel so much more secure. And,
Definitely.
if my dog were to get away from me, it's not getting away from me outside that fence, right? And so
True.
I just feel a lot safer. And so, it's interesting that you bring that up because more and more people are traveling with their dogs. 70% of households in the US have a pet now. And so when you think about real estate and rental housing in particular, people have pets. And so the rental housing industry is just really smart to look at, how can I be marketing to those potential renters and how can I be accommodating those potential renters? And too often what we're seeing is, a typical apartment community will restrict about 10 different breeds.
Yes.
And then often they will also have a weight restriction. We're seeing a lot of the weight restrictions go away, which is really
That's
nice.
good.
But we're still seeing the breed restrictions, which, I think are so largely based in a lot of misinformation out there, right?
Oh,
About
I
larger
agree.
dogs, pit
Mhm.
bull, German shepherds, Rottweilers, the typical dogs that people feel are naturally aggressive. But the truth of the matter is that the science does not support that at all. That behavior in dogs is a lot less about genetics and a lot more about how they're raised, how they're trained, how they're treated, the situations we put them in, right? And then sometimes unfortunate things do happen.
Mhm.
But, I think about my grown daughter who has 4 children now, and when she was about to have her first child, they got a little pit bull puppy. They rescued a pit bull puppy. And initially, my husband and I were like, Sam, do you really want to do that? You're about to have a baby in the house. And she's like, no, 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 this is the sweetest dog. Well, she proved herself right because, and that was really my first exposure to a pit bull in the family because that unbelievably sweet and wonderful dog was with them through the birth of all 4 of their children. That dog was a babysitter. That dog was a dress-up doll. That dog was ridden. I mean, she was the sweetest dog on the planet. Unfortunately, they did lose her a couple of years ago at the age of
No.
14. But when they were a young family and looking for a place to live, they could not find a rental at all
Mhm.
that would accept their dog. So much so that finally my husband and I helped them with a down payment on their first house because they were not gonna be able to find a place to live. Now, not
Oh,
everybody's that
gosh.
lucky, right? Which is why, I, like, really encourage rental housing owners to do a little more research, right? Because a lot of rental housing owners will tell us, for example, that their insurance will not allow them to have certain breeds. But that's really not very true anymore. A lot of insurance companies have no restrictions. And the ones that still do, sometimes it's as easy as having a conversation with your provider and saying, hey, where's the actuarial data on this? And what would it look like if we were to take away those restrictions so that I could have these animals on my property? And you would be amazed at how often the insurance company will say, we can do that. So
Oh, yeah, it just
it's a
takes
lot
that
cheaper.
effort, that little bit of effort
Mhm.
sometimes to get that. Well, even the HOAs, a lot of the HOAs are getting more
Right.
relaxed on that because, like what
Yeah.
you were saying, I think some of them would have a limit of, say, 50 or 60 pounds, and then you
Yeah.
couldn't have a
Yeah.
certain breed. But like you said, most of that is how it's like a kid. They're your kids. It's like, how you raise them.
Yeah.
I've seen people try to make their dogs mean, and I don't know
Oh,
why,
man. Yeah.
but I mean, to
It
me, most
happens,
of the time your
unfortunately.
puppy's gonna protect you no matter what, usually.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
but I think
Yeah.
that's easy. And people, you don't knock on wood. It seems like almost everywhere you go, and when the people do have their pets, they're more about their surroundings and they're taking care of their pet. They're not
Yeah.
they're picking up after their pet and they're taking care of it.
Sure.
You don't
Yeah.
see just walking around with no leash or anything like that. People,
Right. No,
they
you really
bond.
don't see that. And most
Mm-mm.
you listen, most people who have a pet are very responsible with that pet. You
Yeah.
like in everything else in life, you have those exceptions, right? But yes, I mean, and that's one of the things that we talk to operators about is that pet owners make really responsible residents in general,
Mhm.
they also stay a lot longer. And so if you are an operator and especially an owner of rental housing, you're very happy about that because that's fewer turns, that's fewer turn costs, that's less
Mhm.
vacancy loss, and you get really loyal residents who, by the way, tend to create enormous community within that apartment community because what do dog owners do? They hang out together.
They do.
They
They
go to the bark park together. They have play dates for their dogs. They go on walks together. And so people get to know each other. And there's a lot of data out there that supports that when people make 5 friends where they live, they tend to stay where they live. So there're just
okay.
lots of reasons to look at dogs as a huge asset, pets in general as a huge asset to a property.
Oh, I totally agree. Because, like you said, usually, they're going to take care of their pets. They're going to keep everything clean and nice for them and
Yeah.
their pets. And like you said, I mean, almost every time you go out, somebody's going to stop you with that, And a lot of people, when you go walk, you're going to the park, the dog park, and you're going to
Mhm.
meet, like you said, you're going to meet people,
That's
same
right.
thing, doing the same thing.
That's right. Yeah.
So how could I get your information to give out to some of our like I could probably take your information and give it to our property
Sure.
management teams. And then if any you could how could I get them connected to you, I guess you could say.
Absolutely. Well, I will absolutely send you all of my information where we can get
Perfect.
connected and any you're welcome to hand my email address out, but also
Okay.
if people would like to go and take a look at the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative website, and I'll send this
Yes.
to you as well, it's
Yes.
petsandhousing.org. And they have so much useful information because they've done a ton of research. There's a lot of data. There are case studies about apartment communities that have eliminated all of their restrictions and how that has benefited them. There are all kinds of really useful tools. One of the things we hadn't talked about yet was it really is not about restricting a breed, right? It's not that doesn't make your apartment community more safe. What makes your apartment community more safe is looking at dogs as individuals, right?
Mhm.
Because no one wants an aggressive dog on site. No one wants a dog with a
Okay.
bite history on site. But there are ways to do that. So if you go to petsandhousing.org, there are lots of tools to walk you through great ways to do that and lots of other tools, right? How-tos on how to become more pet inclusive. And pet inclusive, by the way, means a lot more than pet friendly. It means not having restrictions. It means not charging unreasonable pet fees and pet rent, those kinds of things.
Mhm.
But their site is just a wealth of information. And then, there's been some shift with HUD lately in terms of what they will and won't enforce with regard to emotional support animals. So there's a site
Okay.
called DR.
I could put them initials out there again, just like how you did that.
Yeah, Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, but they also have a position paper on the HUD memo
Okay.
that recently came out. But the important thing to really remember there is that while HUD said, hey, we're not going to enforce anything really going forward with regard to emotional support animal accommodations, the fair housing law has not changed. So someone can still sue you. There are still state and local laws. So I urge rental housing owners and operators to be really careful about just outright rejecting an emotional support animal request. And I bring this up because, when you have an assistance animal, so service animal,
Mhm.
or an emotional support animal, you cannot charge any kind of pet fee and you cannot restrict by breed or weight or anything else.
Okay.
And so, unfortunately, how some people are getting around that is with an ESA accommodation request, right? There are a lot of very, very legitimate ESA requests, and then there are some that people are just trying to get around the fees or around the restrictions. So the industry has kind of created this problem themselves. But it would be a mistake for the industry to think, okay, now I just don't have to allow ESAs. You still should allow ESAs that are legitimate ESAs,
Right.
but it's
Right.
knowing what is and what isn't, right? And do we really want to be in the business of policing that as an industry? No.
And I think a lot of times when you're given that freedom, like you said, that makes a big difference. Now, let me ask
Uh-huh.
you this. So when you're saying like, I wanted to get an apartment, but my
Mhm.
puppy was 60 pounds.
Right.
So a type like that where you're kind of going against you could take your information and try to get with those, because it's almost like you're still being discriminated because your puppy's
Yes.
too
So,
big.
so here's typically what happens sometimes. And again, I want to stress that there are many, many very legitimate emotional support animal requests out there because people have PTSD or depression or
Yes.
any number of not visible
Mhm.
disabilities. But
And we're a
let's
big
say
military here, down Biloxi is
military,
a big, big military base. So we get a lot of retirees here. And a lot of there's those animals are very important to them.
they're incredibly important to them, not only
Mhm.
because they help them with their PTSD or whatever support issue they may have, but again, their family. But
Yes.
let's say one of my dogs was 75 pounds and I needed to rent an apartment and their weight limit was 50. And I couldn't talk them into coming off of that. I could go talk to my doctor and say, I really need my dog because if my dog is not with me, I tend to fall into depression, whatever, whatever. And the doctor could write me a letter, right? Now that, you know, do I really suffer from depression? No, not in this circumstance, but I do not want to give up my dog. And I have to find an apartment to go live, right? And so I may go get one of those letters to take it to my apartment, not because I'm trying to get around a fee, but because I'm trying to get around the weight restriction. I can't talk all of a sudden. But, you know, so but more importantly, this whole cottage industry has kind of popped up where there are online companies where people can say, I need to get a letter saying, I suffer from depression or I suffer from PTSD or something, so I can take my dog, and they can pay $75 and get it. And they're not talking to a medical professional. They're not doing anything, right? And so that's some of the fraud that is occurring out there.
Okay.
But I like where you were going with it. It is sort of a form of discrimination, right?
Mhm.
Like, why are we limiting based on weight? It really
Right.
doesn't make sense because if
No,
you're a
and
good pet owner, you're making sure your dog is getting enough exercise. And let's
mhm.
face it, the bigger the dog, the more of a couch potato they are typically.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then, again with the whole breed thing, again, you're a responsible pet owner. You're not allowing your powerful dog to be in a situation where it may become agitated, right?
Mhm.
If I have a powerful dog, I know I have a powerful dog. I'm not putting my powerful dog in a situation where for some reason it may feel threatened,
Oh, no.
right?
Or
So,
or it probably even walk it around people,
yeah.
I'll see people with theirs, and sometimes they have those big old dogs that look like almost a pony. And a lot of times I would get on the other side of the road because I'm just thinking that is a big old puppy. If that dog
Mhm.
starts running, somebody else is gonna be running, chasing it. And
Yeah.
and it's like a lot of time, and it's just in our brain, let's step over here and let them come on through, but the puppy never barked, never even looked like,
Yeah.
wagged the tail the whole time I was talking to her. And I'm just sitting there thinking, you can handle this big old dog? I mean, she was
Yeah.
little, and that dog probably 70 pounds. I'm like, I couldn't even walk that dog.
This is why
And
training comes in really handy.
yeah, and I didn't think about that. So we were talking about it a minute ago. I have noticed through the years of being on road trips and all, more and more, like I want to say it was the Holiday Inn Express or either the Marriott. Will all go into that new vinyl floor. So
Mhm.
hardly any of the
Yeah.
rooms now have carpet. Everybody's
Yeah.
gone with that vinyl that looks like the wood.
Yeah.
That would even make a pet thing even friendlier, because used to the
Even
biggest problem is
friendlier.
the smell gets in the rug, you can't clean it, so it's more reasons not to have that pet fee anymore. Let
Yeah.
people have their pets.
Yeah. Let people have their pets. It makes for happier residents, a less stressful time looking for a place to call home.
Mhm.
There are even some statistics that show that the more dogs that you have on property, the less crime there is. Because think about it.
Okay.
We were unfortunate victims of a home invasion many, many years ago while we were
Mm.
on vacation. And we were down in the Keys, when my husband came back up to meet the police at our house and board up the doors that they had
Mm.
broken down to get in, the officer noticed that we had dog bowls And he said, "Where is your dog?" And we had only had one dog at that time, and my husband said, "Well, we brought the dog on vacation with us." And he said, "Next time you go on vacation, leave your dog in the house because it is the number one best deterrent to having your house burglarized. Because when they hear a dog barking, they do not want to come in the house for many
Yep.
reasons. The dog is
Mm-hmm.
making noise. They're alerting you. They're alerting neighbors. They don't know the size of the dog. They don't know the temperament of the dog. So they just move on to the next house, right? And so, yeah, when you have a lot of dogs in an apartment community and they're hearing somebody creeping about, right? They're going to do what dogs do. They're going to start barking.
I love it, especially because I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, you get this big old dog, and he's got just a little voice, like a chihuahua, and then it's like you got a little chihuahua that's got the big dog voice, so you
Yeah,
never know what you're gonna get when you open that door. I
you
mean, it's
don't.
just either you're gonna get the big dog or you're gonna get the chihuahua,
Right.
So, like you said, when they come in, that totally makes sense.
Yeah. Hmm.
That is absolutely, I
Well,
like
what
it.
else can I answer for you today while we're on the
I'm
call?
thinking, I mean, I'm floored with our subject. It's just so much to take in, and
Hmm.
honestly, there's a lot to that.
There really is a lot to it, which is why the Pet Inclusive Housing site is such a great resource. It really is. And I'm happy to talk with anyone who would like to know more about this. I've learned a lot in my 5 years of working with them and obviously know the industry really, really well and know and understand the surrounding all of this very well. And, it's like, I don't know if you remember back in the day, I know when I first started in this industry, you still had all adult apartment communities. And
Oh,
then the fair
wow.
housing laws came out, right, and
Oh,
said, "Nope,
yeah.
you can't do that. You have to allow families, you have to allow children." And now really the only legal segment of that is senior housing, right? Like you
Mhm.
can have 55 and older housing and that you can say, "Yes, we only allow 55 and older." But yeah, and so I look at pets as sort of similar to that, right? Because there was also a time in this industry where almost no one allowed pets at all in their
Damn.
apartments. And now almost everyone does. And I feel like just that the weight and the breed restrictions are the one last component that will ultimately sort of fall by the wayside
Mhm.
because people are realizing more and more that it is, it is preventing them from renting to certain people, first of all.
Mhm.
They are finding out that pets don't do the damage that they think that they do over time, and there's a lot of data around that too,
Mhm.
and that communities that have allowed more pets on site aren't seeing bigger incidences of aggression and biting, right? So it just, it makes a lot of sense for providers to allow people with their pets, whatever that pet may look like. Now, and listen,
Mhm.
again, not advocating for an animal that is dangerous and not advocating for every exotic animal known to mankind,
No.
right? I saw a thing the other day where someone was trying to claim that an alligator was their emotional support animal. And you're just like,
Mm.
come on, people, let's get a grip.
Right? That's amazing. Well, when I started thinking now that we said there, I'm flashing back to my dealing days at the casinos, and I remember I had people that would come in from Gainesville, and she would fly in with her group of ladies, their friend. They would come in every year, and it was like
Mhm.
I think they had a canasta card game they all played or something
No
like that,
kidding.
and they would come in every year, and she would fly, and she told me her husband would bring the motor home. I was like, "Well, why don't you fly with you?" She said, "The pets." She said, "So we're only booking the room to have it, but we're gonna be across the street with our pets in our RV." And
How
I was
about
like,
that?
I just thought about that. So a lot, so you could think how many people would buy an RV so they could travel with their pets.
Sure. Yeah.
So now it's like, all
Yeah.
you gotta do is find the right one. Give us that,
Yeah.
Judy, one more time, that website.
That's petsandhousing.org.
Perfect. Perfect. Well,
Mhm.
yeah, I hope everybody's enjoyed that. Judy, I have loved talking to you. We're gonna have to do it again.
Same, Patrick. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you
It
so
has
much.
been. That's great information. Honestly, I love it.
Awesome.
I love it.
Well,
Thank you, Judy.
anytime.
Definitely.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day. All right.
You
Bye bye.
too. Bye-bye.
Thank y'all again for taking the time to come along my venture with me. I am Patrick Merrill, and I hope you have been lifted. If not, let me know. We'll figure out a way. There's always a way. Thank y'all again for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and tell your friends. Y'all have a great day.